Want to take your places. We're going to call this meeting of the City of Flagstaff Regional Plan Committee on Monday, September 30th to order at 6:02 p.m. and we'll take roll call. We'll do introductions after roll call if that's cool.
That's great. Ally Applin. You hearing us online? We're gonna do a sound check. And then can you guys online hear us?
Yes.
You, okay. Paul Byer,
Here.
Tina Berger. Here. Ally Applin. Online. I'll try her again in a minute. Alicia Chi.
I'm here. This is Ally. Sorry.
Oh, that's fine. Hi, Ally. Abel Estrella. Dirk Foreman. Dirk online. Anthony Garcia.
Here.
Susie Garrettson. She's on her way, right?
She was going on Zoom.
Okay, yeah, she's coming online. Okay. Robert Hamilton.
Here.
David Hayward. Michelle James. Julie Lead.
Here.
Rick Miller.
Here.
Tom Pearson.
Here.
Robert Phelps. Or I'm sorry, Walter Phelps. Why did I say Robert? Sorry, Walter Phelps. The online. Kimberly Robinson. Online. John Van Landingham.
Here.
Diane Vosick.
Here.
Al White. Christy Zeller already said she's not coming. Okay.
And Dirk just joined.
Oh, and Dirk just joined. I was expecting him. Dirk Foreman, can you do my check for us quickly?
Present.
Thank you.
And if we can have folks from the city themselves
Sure.
in alphabetical order.
In alphabetical order. Ooh. Challenge. Why don't we let Greg go first and we'll go around city staff.
Good evening, Greg Clifton, serving as your city manager.
If you all know me, Michelle McNulty, the planning director.
Ms. McNeely, Assistant Director of Community Development and Planning Manager for Coconino County.
Neil, you're next.
Neil Chapman, Wildland Fire Captain, Flagstaff Fire Department. Good evening, everybody. Paulo Trogi. I work in Wildland Fire with the Fire Department.
Lee Williams, Operations Section Director, Water Services.
Mac McNamara, Engineering Section Director with Water Services. Good evening, Dan Full, Community Development Director with the city.
Good evening, Shannon Jones, Water Services Division Director.
And are there staff online who are going to introduce themselves?
Several.
Call on them, Elsa.
Okay, Joanne, do you want to go first?
Sure, I'll go first. Hi, everybody. Joanne Keene, Deputy City Manager for the city.
Hi there, Jenny Neiman, Climate Action Section Director in the Sustainability Office. I will see you in person in about 5 minutes.
Mike.
Genevieve, do you want to go next? Not her, but I think you're right. Genevieve, we didn't hear you, but I see it.
Can you hear me now? Elsa?
Yes.
Okay, I'll try again. Hi, everyone. Genevieve Pair 3 with the Flagstaff Sustainability Office.
And then we have Scott Overton.
Hi, Scott Overton, City of Flagstaff Public Works Director.
And then Kevin.
Kim, just join us. You want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, sorry. Kim Musselman, Deputy County Manager for Camino County.
Do you want to introduce yourself?
Mary Young from Water Services Online, and so is Kevin Finsel from Legal, who here in case we have questions for him, as staff does.
Susie.
And Susie Garrettson just showed up, just made it online too. I think that's the roll call plus introductions.
Okay, wonderful. Would anyone like to read the Indigenous land acknowledgement?
The city of Flagstaff humbly acknowledges the ancestral homelands of its natives and regions and original stewards. These lands are still inhabited by native descendants, for the mountains sacred to indigenous peoples. We honor them, their legacies, their traditions, their continued contributions. Celebrate their past, present, and future generations will forever know this place as home.
Thank you. And Kevin, cover your ears. We're gonna do an item that's not on the agenda. And do,
Greg will sit.
taking this.
I think our city manager is going.
This, yeah.
David, before you move to that, sorry to interrupt, but Kevin Finsel cannot hear. So I'm not sure if you were just calling on him, he cannot hear. So just letting you know, he's trying to figure that out. That's not what I was saying, but yes. Thank you.
Thanks, Joanne. We'll stay in order. Greetings. Normally the mayor would be here. I'm going to do this on her behalf. But I was in front of you all during one of your first meetings. And at that time, I was thanking you for what we all knew was going to be a lot of work, a lot of time, and several months have spanned, and here we are again. And here I am again, thanking you for now a little bit past tense, all the work that you have performed. It's a very important planning process. And I know how much time you all have allocated. I read the outcomes of these meetings, try to keep up with what you're doing. I want to thank you for doing this. It's so critically important. The mayor has signed these really nice recognitions. I think I have those for everyone who is present, and then I will leave it to you to circulate the ones for those who are online. I would just want to read one of these and then I'll hand them out. I think it's a very nice recognition. It looks like this. And she has signed each one, and it says the following: the city of Flagstaff recognizes the effort put into the detailed review of the Flagstaff Regional Land Use Plan 2045 from December 2023 to September 2024. As the Flagstaff region evolves, the plan is committed to preserving our unique character, embracing our rich history, and safeguarding our precious natural resources. Through these efforts, the plan aims to foster a resilient community and vibrant economy where all residents have the opportunity to thrive. So very nice recognition for your hard work from esteemed mayor, and I'll pass these out to you.
Hamilton, thank you for your service. Diane Bonesick, what an amazing voice, what an excellent leader. You are too, Robert. John Van Landingham, what a pillar of the community. Tom Pearson, what a pain in my, I'm just joking. Miller, your old school intuition has really shined through.
Thanks, Julie.
Julie Lead, voice of leadership, thank you very much. Del James, thank you for your voice.
Thank you, Greg.
Really beneficial to forming so much of this.
Anthony Garcia, thank you for your music. I have to say, I wake up at 3 a.m., there's gonna be one thing going through my mind. We are the regional planning. Yeah, so thank you for that. Anyway, thanks again. It's been a good journey and a very important one, and maybe we can all give a round of applause to all of you.
Do you have something?
Yes, so on behalf of Coconino County, we don't have a lovely little thing to read, but we have these cool posters that we would like to give just as a small token of our appreciation as well from the county and for all of the work that you have done. I am kind of new to this whole process, but have certainly been following along and reading all the minutes and just the number of hours and all of the thought. Sure, I'll give you half.
I'll take half.
And then you can get.
In the
yeah.
interest of time.
Yes, keep things moving.
Just toss it.
Just toss them out.
Sit right.
While she's passing those out, I wanted to thank everybody for staying the course with the process. It was a long slog and a long haul, and it seems like we all got better and closer together and more united as things went on. Thank you guys.
Hey, Anthony's use of the past tense notwithstanding, we're gonna do some more work tonight, so. We'll kick it off with talking about the organization of the document.
Yes. So at our last meeting, we discussed shifting the organization of the document from the way we had created it in chapters to an organization that had a policy section that is what could apply to a development case, and an implementation section, which was really for staff and people who were more interested in the implementation details. We sent that out to you as part of this draft document that went out on the 12th so that you could take a look at it. And we did receive a couple comments from committee members wanting to discuss whether some parts of the implementation section should be combined with chapter 3 and how that should look. One thing to note is that because we sent you the Word document, which we have now sent to the writer editor who's getting it all loaded up into InDesign, so it's not only lovely, but we can add some functionality once it's in that software. Version you are looking at did not have all the internal links. Ultimately, when this is all in InDesign and finalized and sent out to the public on the 20th, there would be links in chapter 3 that would take you to the relevant chapters and let you find other material. So I think there weren't any notes about that, and so I wanted to make sure people remembered that, but we are very happy to have a couple minutes of discussion. The way the agenda is put together is we set this one out to be about a 7 or 10 minute discussion. To stay on track for the next item too, we need to kind of limit our conversation to 10 to 12 minutes per item. Some I know will go faster and some I know will go a little slower. But we're going to start with the warm-up question of how did we feel about the new organization and are there comments?
I had a quick question. So what percentage of the thing that we read this last, the current regional plan, what percentage of that is finished and how much more complete will it be after the plan?
So the way I've described this in the past, and I've sort of put it in like engineering terms for the engineer, is the version you got sent was the 30% plans. It was really thorough and very well done. And what we will send out when we have all of your input and have incorporated it, note that I have about 100 comments from just the committee, not all of which we will be discussing tonight. Because some of them are, editorial more so, and we've just not been discussing those at committee. We will be at the 50% plan. It'll also all be in InDesign for the first time, so it will have graphics and page dividers, and the maps will be in their final format. So that's kind of the 50%. So there's still plenty of room for this 60-day public engagement to include feedback on all the things we're going to discuss tonight. I guess the point I was gonna make earlier, which I should have made earlier, is that the, sorry, is that, the draft is still a draft and we can endorse and send out a draft that has some room for improvement. Just to make sure that we can get feedback. So some of what we might discuss tonight, we might choose to send something out that is at 60 or 80% consensus because we're looking for feedback on it. We can also, as we're talking tonight, if there's things you'd like us to particularly highlight in the public education or materials or in how we engage the public on the plan during the 60-day review, we'll be taking notes on that, even if it doesn't mean there's a change to the plan itself.
You.
Thanks. There's one hand up online.
Whoever's on, who is it?
Susie.
Susie, if you'd like to go ahead online.
Yes, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me?
You can, Susie. Can you hear us?
Oh, okay, now, yes.
Great.
So on that chapter 3, goals and policies, is that what we're talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
From item 4.
I just want to reiterate the thing that I said in my comments paper was that I really feel like in goals and policies, there also needs to be the implementation guidelines, the action items, and the implementation staff shoulds, plus the high priorities and other action items. I think they should all be in that one chapter because otherwise people have to flip back and forth. And, you know, and yes, I know some of it may be for staff, but the public doesn't know that. And so I just feel like it all needs to be in one place so they can look at it. And then you can highlight or let them click on a link to get back to the regular chapter. Anyway, just wanted to put my opinion in there. Because it's a huge document and well, it's confusing to people that aren't planning people.
Is there a solution to this within the digital copy? In other words, the hyperlinks and whatnot? All that.
Yes, yeah, we can. We're really designed the document to be used electronically, even though we will provide some hard copies to the library and some city like counters where we're answering questions. So there will be hyperlinks that you can use internally so that if we could set up in chapter 3 and say for relevant implementation guidelines, you know, and then you can click and it'll open it up for you. And we can work out ways to do that so that it doesn't feel so jumpy. We're already kind of tasked the graphic designer with that task and like figuring it out in terms of design. So we would be able to do that from anywhere in the document, not necessarily just chapter 3.
I like that idea. Is that something that can be done for the public version? Because I was looking at it and I think other people were too, probably from the point of view, how are they gonna find it? They're having trouble finding things. So, yeah, the hyperlinks might solve that problem. At least we could give that a try. I guess I wasn't sure the hyperlinks would be ready for the public version.
They will.
I was concerned when I was hearing from people that they were having trouble.
Yeah, they will be. It's just that it didn't make sense to spend the time to put them in a Word document and then recreate them all in design. That's just a workflow.
Everyone be comfortable then leaving it with the hyperlinks, and if we get further feedback of the public comment period, we can reevaluate. Good with that?
Is that mine? Feedback from anyone online?
Susie still has her.
Oh, sorry, I'll take it down, but no, I'd like to have it all in one chapter, but if everybody else agrees, then we'll go with it, with having just hyperlinks.
Okay, we're going to move on to reviewing the comments that we got from a lot of the folks on the committee prior to. Fortunately, apparently fortunately for me, Sarah and Elsa have organized these to sort of into sections, so each relevant portion reference back to comments on each of these. So we have 2 hours for all of this. As of you can do the math, it's about 10 minutes each, touch more. So we are gonna have to move through them relatively quickly. So please keep that in mind. And we'll get started with the first one, which is on chapter 2, how the plan works. I'm talking specifically about major and minor and categories and some administrative changes. And I think there were some questions about what should and should not count as a major and a minor.
Right. If you'll remember way back in like maybe our second meeting, I did a whole presentation that major plan amendments must be done ahead of any other development, such as a rezoning case or an annexation. So they take more time, they cost more, and they add time. So our current plan had a list of major plan amendments. We revised it 2 years later because none of them worked. And then we have been carrying forward those 12 categories for the last 7 or 8 years. We looked at the plan. We didn't provide those to you as part of the chapter by chapter review because we had to kind of see where everything landed. Major and minor plan amendments are not dictated by the state. We define them in the plan, and that is where we will always define them. One thing that's new this time around is other plans, including the Coconino County Comprehensive Plan, have always had a category for administrative changes. The regional plan has not. And so therefore, every time a hyperlink goes out of date, or there's a minor Scrivener's error, or there's some kind of judicial or legislative change that we need to reflect, it was a more serious amendment that had to go through a public hearing process. So part of what staff is requesting in the way that we've set up chapter 2 and we're proposing is that administrative changes be added so that, and that would help us maintain hyperlinks and make this a more interactive electronic document than what we currently have, which was really designed to be used in a binder on paper. Major and minor plan amendments, we've tried to simplify them. We've heard some feedback internally that having simpler categories would be helpful to us moving forward, and ones that are really focused on the priorities of the plan and what we learned through scenario planning. There are 2 categories that were major that staff has proposed to make minor. One is changes to the urban growth boundary, which you all got a staff report on the urban growth boundary review. So let's make conversation about that one part of item 5B instead of 5A. But then the second one is changes or modifications or additions from goals and policies. That is a category that was added in 2016, so added after the plan had been adopted previously. We basically did some updates and then to that table of major plan amendments, and then that was added by the council at the time. That has some pros and cons. The pros are that it really holds the integrity of the original goals and policies. And the cons are it's harder to update the goals and policies for things like a carbon neutrality plan or an active transportation master plan. It raises the bar for some of those important policy evolutions from being easily incorporated into the draft. So that's part of why that's proposed a little differently. And that was noticed by a couple reviewers. They said it looks like some of these categories have changed. So are there any desire to change any of the minor plan amendment categories, which I think Elsa has pulled up, to major? Are there any concerns about the administrative changes proposed? And that's basically what we'd like to hear.
Comments, folks?
It seems to me that if you're proposing to add or delete a goal, I mean, it seems like a major step. I think modification to address new information or something like that is a minor activity. I understand that. But when I look at the goals that have been articulated in this document, they're substantive. And so it seems, and kind of the cornerstone of what's going on. So that strikes me as strange to be a minor amendment if you're gonna delete one of those.
So are you proposing that we split it, of adding and deleting be a major amendment and just modifying be a minor?
That would work for me.
Would that work for you guys on a practical level? My feeling is if, if based on, the experience you've had over the past 10 years of dealing with the regional plan and having to work through these types of amendments, if you're proposing that it's minor, that carries a lot of weight.
Well, the only people who have standing to change a goal or policy in the plan is basically city and county staff. It's not like someone could propose to amend a goal just for their single property. So it's kind of limited who even has standing to propose one. So it has to go through a process usually where there's a reason staff is proposing it. It's work that we always have more work than we have time. So, and we have staff to do. So I think staff feels that's not as much of a risk. Like we would never be proposing a plan amendment if there weren't some programmatic reason or direction from council or the board of supervisors or the planning director. So for instance, like a housing emergency, we didn't do a plan amendment for the housing emergency because we didn't have staff time to do a major plan amendment and add policies. We asked them to wait until the plan update. But we could have done one much more concurrent with that process if it had been a minor plan amendment category. Jenny kind of went through this with us because we did the carbon neutrality update to the plan in 2019, 2020? 2021. We finished it. Maybe we started it in 2020. And we modified some and then we also added some. Like there was kind of a combination, I think, of things we did. And some of the modifications were pretty big. I think that the difference between modifying and deleting might be hard to tell, like how much change constitutes a deletion. That probably would be my biggest question is we'd probably have to add some clarifying language of like, how much can you change it before you've essentially deleted it? Because that feels like it could get sketchy, but that's part of why we're proposing as minors, because it would never come up unless it was being proposed on behalf of the city or county for a more programmatic.
Does anyone else have any other comments on this?
Yeah.
Sir, it's been helpful to hear you say policy, meaning policy related to like something like the carbon neutrality plan or like that. That totally makes sense to me. You say deleting a goal. Is that adding, modifying, or deleting a goal?
Well, you could be adding a goal because there's a whole thing we didn't talk about right now that pops up in 3 years, right? We cannot, as much as we're talking about the future, it can be hard to predict the future, but there could be some major technology change or major societal shift that we didn't really address that is now becoming a big issue. And so we could add a whole goal and associated policies if there's some kind of big event like that.
Yeah, I'm more comfortable with separating. Suggested by Diane's comment in the beginning than yours. I'm always of the opinion that the public should have a chance to comment. Have something held like a public hearing or some kind of option to comment on things.
Well, there's always a public hearing with a minor plan amendment.
What is the functional difference between the two?
A major plan amendment has to be processed within a year of it being deemed complete. It has 2 public hearings with the Planning and Zoning Commission and 1 with the City Council. A minor plan amendment just has 1 with Planning and Zoning and 1 with City Council. But it's really a difference of 1 meeting and the fact that a minor amendment doesn't have a timer set on it at all.
And that's something that state statute actually lays out for cities towns and counties is that major amendment can only be heard once per year. So that's an ARS.
That's only for counties now.
Oh, okay, that changed. for
Yeah,
counties.
for
Okay, well, that's true
cities,
for
we can do
counties
it
still.
differently.
It doesn't take a year anymore.
It can't, so this is kind of detailed, but the county still has to do it from January to December, and cities can now process a major plan amendment and completeness to adoption with a year that starts anytime during the calendar. Does that make sense? Like if you applied and we deemed your application complete on May 1st, we would have until the following May 1st to get it approved, essentially.
Then there used to be something about, well, you could only do a major plan amendment once a year.
Yes, and that's still true for the county, but the legislature changed it for cities. We have a more flexible timeline now.
So the only difference is one meeting.
Yes, the difference for city is one meeting, and the difference for the county is kind of those older requirements still apply to counties. They might go away in the next few years.
Just, can you quickly tell us what the impact was of you not putting the housing crisis goal in the existing plan?
So
One less meeting to prepare for, sounds like.
a few less weeks to remember. Yeah, that's true. I mean, you know, the committee that put together the emergency and the housing plan, they felt that the regional plan goals and policies were really outdated, and they wanted to move faster because, you know, it is an emergency in our community. So it slowed down getting that done by at least 2 years. So it created a delay.
Sorry. What happened now?
I mean, we are essentially through this update process,
I know.
updating it. Yeah.
If there was another big thing like that, another emergency, we can't really handle another one, but let's say there's another one.
Well, there's gonna be another one.
Is it gonna do that? Is it gonna delay things?
Yeah, it makes
The way
it,
it's written now, or does that just?
well, the way it's written now, we think would allow us to move it forward quickly because, you know, more flexibility overall. We know who can actually propose these. And it's not Joe Smith wants to propose a plan amendment on a policy for their individual property. They don't have standing. Title 11 of the city code doesn't even give them the ability to apply for it.
Yeah, I'd like
Sarah?
to,
I have my hand up.
Sorry, Susie had her hand up.
go ahead, Susie.
Okay, you know, I'd be okay with splitting it, but especially the deleting the goal or policy, that I feel like needs to be in the major amendments, just because, you know, the city's going to vote for this. So changing something that they vote for, it seems like it needs to be a major thing rather than a minor thing, especially deleting.
Okay, I would like to push this to a show of hands so we can move on to the next one. I'm gonna suggest just the change as opposed to the splitting, just to make things less complicated stuff. So I guess all those in favor of switching, adding, removing, or modifying a goal or policy to be a major plan amendment. Is show of hands of
I
those.
think it was adding or deleting major, modifying minor. Is that correct?
Well, it's
Say.
morphing. So what we just heard Susie say is she was most concerned about deleting, because deleting something that the citizens have voted on seems more consequential. And I agree with that. I'm more comfortable going to minor being an addition, if you need to move expeditiously, or modifying. I'm very comfortable with that.
I think that's practical, like that's practical, right? Because deletion isn't obvious. Easily definable. All right, so show of hands, those are in favor of moving deletion of a goal or policy to being a major plan. That carries easily, so.
Is there anybody online?
Can I just say yes?
Righty, we're gonna move on to the urban growth boundary. See whoever's doing that.
Mac.
Like that.
Yeah. Give it to Elsa, she can confirm.
Slide that out. So make sure you take everything off.
Sorry, just give a second. Technical difficulty.
And I just walk into a bar.
You only have 9 missing.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we've got,
Kind of skip through those.
yeah, skip
That's what I was
through.
wondering. We
Yeah,
could-
let's just. skip
Everybody
through
here
a
knows about
couple.
the first
Yeah,
handful.
you guys all know, this is the presentation that Mac and I also did at the Water Commission. Let's maybe just say the Water Commission reviewed the staff report that you all received and got this presentation last week, 19th. Or was it 2 Thursdays ago? Maybe it was 2 weeks ago. Time is kind of relative. But they actually looked at this already and we asked for their input ahead of time because we wanted you to know that they support this proposal and agreed unanimously that they would like to move in this direction of having increased flexibility. We go through like the first couple slides, we'll tell you when to stop. Yeah, the maps.
Place to stop.
Yep. So the urban growth boundary has some history in the city. There was an urban service boundary that was adopted in the 1990s. And then as we've adopted regional plans, we've set up this urban growth boundary. In 2001, in the regional land use and transportation plan, this was a boundary that we used pretty flexibly. It had like 2 phases to it, had a phase 1 and a phase 2. And the 2014 adopted plan combined those 2 phases. So phase 2 became the urban growth boundary. There were no longer 2 of them. And it went from a minor plan amendment to change the urban growth boundary to a major plan amendment to change the urban growth boundary. Because of that, we have had times in the last 10 years where communities were interested, or because of issues like the Schultz water line discussion, there was water lines going near properties outside the urban growth boundary, but we were not able to move forward in providing those neighborhoods water services because they're outside the urban growth boundary. And so I'll let Mac take it from there.
Sure,
As
sounds like a good place.
point.
So like I said before, I'm Mac McNamara. I'm the engineering section director for water services. We put this map together as a visual aid to kind of describe what Sarah's talking about. So you have them read out here is the city limits. Within blue is the urban growth boundary. And then there are some small portions that you can barely see in purple where they do share the same border. A couple things that are interesting here, just to note on here. There are some large land areas down here in the southeast corner and northwest that are inside the city limits, but they're outside the urban growth boundary. Couple other things too. We do have potable drinking water lines south outside city limits and the urban growth boundary where we do serve residents down there. We do have transmission mains up Schweitzer Canyon to our north res that do run through county neighborhoods that are existing. The other thing too, you can't see on here, there are several county islands within the city limits that may be challenging to pre-annex or annex, that may be good to get off septic systems and get off of water. So why modify the language? So we're looking for flexibility in the current language to provide water services outside the urban growth boundary. There's potentially several benefits to the community, ratepayers, and the regional water supply. We've listed just a handful here. But so fewer people drilling wells for developments. Some of those wells are unregulated. There's not water conservation, and then it leads to more water hauling. And as I mentioned before, reduction of traffic and carbon emissions caused by water hauling. There's several people in the county that come into the city limits, use the load out stations, and then they've got to drive out to the county. Snowball, a lot of water, So we get a lot of extra vehicle miles traveled on our roads. There's potential for improved fire protection in the region from the hydrants that could be placed on transmission lines, distribution mains, potential feeds for sprinkler systems for fire suppression in buildings. We have potential for capturing more wastewater, produce more reclaim, if we brought in wastewater lines with the water lines. There's potential to collect capacity fees from people who have not bought into the system, but they still get the service by hauling water. There's potential for enforcement of conservation measures. And then, of course, there's ability to control engineering and construction standards. There's several areas that have developed that may not be up to city engineering standards in our construction codes. If they were ever bankrupted, dilapidated, and we were in the position of taking them over, they wouldn't be up to our engineering and construction standards. And then on the other side, there's potential conflicts with the regional plan if we do get some flexibility in language. So providing water outside the urban growth boundary could counter the priority to support denser mixed-use neighborhoods with infill. And then there was an exploratory scenario planning showed that infill and focusing development within the urban growth boundary could result in reduction in housing cost, greater use of walking and biking if the urban growth boundary controlled density, reduction of regional vehicle miles traveled with that density, and then reduce the wildland urban interface risks. The last one we had listed here was help manage long-term maintenance operation costs by not creating fewer new facilities in these outlying areas. The last slide we brought up here, I'm not sure if you've seen that in the packet, but we have our suggested language down here. One of the key things in here is that we would like to require sewer with water if we were to extend out the urban growth boundary. That's all I have. I think we're just looking to have an open discussion, questions for us, and then looking for general supports or not.
Can I just say, I think it's important to note that we are suggesting taking this from a major plan amendment, which it is in the current plan, to a minor plan amendment. It would also mean that when we do that, just like we did in 2014, Water Services would then update all its policies and take that to council as well. And so some of this is, these are kind of, remember, implementation guidelines are those guiding principles, but the details of how that gets done actually belongs in the master plan and the policies of Water Services. So there would still be other constraints and processes that would have to go through. It's not like the plan amendment gets you a water meter. That's just one of the first steps if you're outside the urban growth boundary. It's not the only step. So just want to make sure people keep that in mind, because I know we're talking about what should this first step look like, but it is a very complex process after that. And that's why, currently we have not always required that sewer be brought on commensurate with water, but this move towards having more advanced water treatment means that that expense comes with it. So it's not like we expect there would be, would you say, Mac? We don't expect that there would be people who want to stay on their septic who would want water. If they want that, they're going to start moving in the direction of also getting sewer, which is a big expense.
Yes.
Hey, Dirk here. Can I start this conversation?
You're gonna have to fight it out with Paul, but yeah.
And Greg had his hand up too.
Yeah, Dirk, go ahead.
Okay, so I think I understand what you're getting at with this, with providing water and sewer services outside of the city limits. How many, and this may be a rhetorical question, I know where I'm going with this. How many communities do you already provide water for outside of the city limits?
That.
Do you know?
Comes to mind, but
I guess just one thing.
The city limits, aren't we talking about outside the urban growth?
That's what I was gonna add. So we're talking outside urban growth boundary.
Okay, let's talk about Pinedale. Pinedale's had city water, I think, since like 1956 or so. And, you know, they barely get enough water for their domestic use, let alone the minimal amount of flow that comes out of their fire hydrants. So the city is certain that they can provide that water outside of places when you're not doing it now with the community that's been on the city water system since 1956 or so.
So what I would say to that is, so the water going to Pinedale, the line is undersized. It's not a general resource that we're short on water. It's the distribution system getting it to Pinedale.
I think there's also a point
Okay.
that doesn't commit the city.
I guess that's not it. That's not solving my questioning of my concern with Pinedale's water supply. You're gonna put a bigger line in?
We do have a line in our capital program to upsize that line. Yes.
And then for them to continue getting water, you would require them to be on sewer then also?
Potentially. We haven't thought through that scenario. I'm not sure gravity sewer works from Pinedale. They've also been grandfathered in since the 50s. So this new policy change might not affect them.
Okay. Thanks.
Might be somewhat related. So these places are not city residents, so they don't pay city taxes.
Might be city residents. It may or may
There
not.
are some areas of the city that are outside the urban.
So those county islands within the city, do they pay city taxes?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just wondering, like, who's gonna pay for this? So they say, hey, yeah, I'd love sewer and give me water. I want to turn on the tap and I want the sewer to go away. But I don't pay taxes.
Yeah, so they would, of course, they'd be responsible for the infrastructure to go in. And then they'd also be required to become a ratepayer.
So as a group then, so it's like there's 20 people there and 6 of them say, I'll pay. Do they pay all costs? That kind of stuff. I just want to know you've worked it out. You don't have to tell me the details. Just tell me.
Yeah, you know, and I think every case is kind of a one-off and it's interesting. It's what we'd have to do. But would have to pool money or some other means for that infrastructure. The current ratepayers and the taxpayers right now would not pay for that distribution or collection.
So as a process, neighborhoods can these district and they can help, or they can help the ability to bond and do constructions. There are ways, but we've never gone there because we've not given ourselves the ability to drag.
Thank you. Thanks for teeing up this conversation. I will state to this group exactly what I stated to the water commission the other night. The only time I have ever felt cause to come in and talk to you about this plan, but I attribute a lot of importance to this topic. What we're seeing here in the map depicts, I think, an importance, which is there's a significant part of the city that lies outside of the urban group. Understand that some of that is, or maybe a good part of it might be federal land. These plans occur for a long period of time and things happen. And that's exactly the message I want to hear. And things happen that are not entirely foreseen as you're having these discussions at this point in time. The concept or the idea or scenario of a failing water system involving wells, or a failing wastewater system, typically involving septic or a small treatment facility, lagoon, facility as an example. These are not unusual. Things happen and they happen time. It's a given that they will happen. It's not a hypothetical. Jurisdictions I've served, I've seen these come in frequently, both in water and wastewater. In each instance, the municipality is looked upon as being able to provide a remedy that is desperately needed. Imagine a group of homes, in this case, that exist in the city that have a failing water system. They want to hook onto the city's centralized water utility because they are city citizens, they're residents of the city. And in an ironclad scenario where we say there's no flexibility, we will not extend water services beyond our urban growth boundaries, we will be in a position to have to say no to our fellow citizens of the city, who are taxpayers of the city, seeking a city service. That's a hard pill to swallow. What I'm used to seeing is the city providing the remedy. To your question, Paul, it's typically at the cost of those seeking the service, almost always. So that brings the service, it extends it to the properties and brings those properties into the utility. They may not annex, or in the case of being beyond the urban growth boundary, they are city residents, they don't have to annex it. And we'll keep this to the urban growth boundary. There's a different scenario if we're talking about going beyond the corporate boundaries of the city. But just keeping it to the urban growth boundary, it just makes sense to have that flexibility. The scenario I just mentioned, failing water wells and a water supply and failing wastewater have occurred here in Flagstaff. We have that happening as we speak. If we think about the urban growth boundary as we should as a line of demarcation where beyond which we don't want to see a lot of urban development. The scenario we're describing about water utilities and providing remedies to failing systems does not necessarily equate to increased. Many of these instances, the growth is already there. It's a failing system to rectify. And so where I'm going with that is, I don't think this flexibility necessarily needs to translate into a violation of the underlying principles of the urban growth boundary. I think they can be well respected. Conversely, I think absent the city providing these remedies forces peripheral properties that are experiencing problems with their water or wastewater utilities to do something else. And that something else could involve, as was just mentioned, the creation of a company or eventually a district. And that begs the question, is it a good idea, especially as we're talking about growth management, to allow or invite, or even in this case, incentivize the institution of water companies or wastewater companies or packaged wastewater plants outside the corporate boundaries of the city where there is no regulatory control. And we are no longer able to do things that we otherwise could implement with our users, like conservation, like good wastewater treatment, and all these other considerations. Those things will no longer be at play. So we'll have the growth, and typically there is growth associated in those scenarios because they generate the revenues necessary to maintain those independent utilities. So I think there's an argument to be made that better growth management would suggest that we do take control of the city utility and extend it where it makes sense to do so, and have much more of a say about the usage of that utility. So I'll stop it there. I think this is an important discussion. It's one that comes up a lot. Because it would be a minor amendment, it necessarily goes to the the city council. So it'll be vetted. It will be transparent. And there will be lots of checks and balances to make sure that whatever the outcomes are, that they are within the intent of the regional plan. So it's an important issue when it does come up. It is certainly important to those who are seeking service. Rest assured, we heard about one subdivision already, and I'm not familiar with that one, but decades ago, they hooked onto city water services. Good example. So I'm here to answer any questions that you may have, or I want to sit and listen to the conversation, but I just wanted to share with you this perspective. Thanks.
Anyone else with questions or comments on this item?
I just have a quick question. Why was it brought up now?
You know, we went back and forth on what to do about the urban growth boundary internally for quite a while. And our goal had always been to present it to you in June when we reviewed the water chapter. But we just hit roadblocks internally on trying to understand what was the best thing to present to you at that time. So really it was us kind of trying on a bunch of different ideas. It wasn't, you're getting like our best idea, but we had like 3 or 4 others that we decided weren't as implementable or feasible. So it was complicated, and we've been working on it since February. So, yeah.
One last comment from Dirk Foreman. You know, I agree with flexibility, and I really like that. And I really agree that, you know, any properties that are certainly within the city limits, right, should be afforded the opportunity to get on city utilities, water and wastewater. But I also, I thought I heard this, and I just want to see if I'm correct on this. You know, if an area forms a domestic water improvement district, a DWID, or any kind of a special district, there's a lot of regulation wrapped around that from the state statute. They're not totally unregulated organizations. They are regulated by the state. There's a lot of ARS that's written around domestic water improvement districts. So to say that they're not regulated, I think that's a little bit of a some misnomer there. Just that. Thanks.
Derek.
So I see this more as a scenario of a subdivision or a larger development. I don't see this applying to a lot that's just outside of the county, or excuse me, just outside of the urban growth boundary. I don't think we're talking on like because it's just not feasible. It's not what we're talking about. So we're talking more about the subdivision level and serving water and sewer subdivision level. I'm not sure about marrying the water and sewer piece. I see some really big challenges with the sewer component. It's because of the topography. And we have a requirement that it needs to be a gravity system for the city to be willing to accept that into the system. Right, but I just think that could be really challenging. I think when you roll this out and when you're talking with folks, you know, the comment about, you know, people who have not bought into the system, or they're getting service by hauling water, or that those folks may not be conserving water. I would just be careful in some of that language, because I would say that people who aren't connected to the city system, even when they are in the city limits, usually conserve water because it is very expensive. 4,000 gallons costs about $300. And you look at your water bills and you can kind of do the math. It's very expensive to have water if you're not connected to the city system. It's also very expensive to do a on-site wastewater system, to treat it to the quality that's required, given the soils that we have. Anyway, just in the messaging part, I think just to be aware of the folks that do not have that opportunity to connect to city services.
Expensive if you don't haul it yourself at that much.
Correct.
Yes, just as a water hauler, just want to make the rates are not that high if you're doing it yourself. If you're paying for the trucking, not the water.
Anyone online also?
We have spent quite a bit of time on this one. So would like to get to a conclusion soon if we can. Is there anyone else who has the questions or comments?
I trust the lead of the Water Commission forwarding this to us, and their expertise is valid enough for me to be on board.
There were a few people who had concerns in their comments and said that they thought it should be a major plan amendment. Anybody had that comment earlier, want to speak? Or has this conversation changed your mind?
Julie?
I think it comes down to land use, right? It's what Greg was articulating, that if you are going to look at a land use that's very different, that's going to automatically go through the process, and the utilities component is maybe even a lesser piece of that process.
I agree with Anthony that the commission, this is the way to go, and staff seems relatively in favor of it. Then it's the right move. Does anyone have any objections to that? Should we go with, we can live with that? Staff was proposed. Everyone live with it? Right?
Just a quick question, is that map here? Or is it gonna be single in,
It will be in there.
right? So people can see it not by zip code, that actually.
This is on the map is not this like strongly drawn, but it is on the urban growth boundary, and the city limits are on the future growth illustration. They are on the biggest map in the, Susie had her hand up, just so you know, there was one.
I was just voting yes.
All right, great. Thanks, guys. Thank Mac.
I just wanted to let you know it was almost a 30-minute conversation, primarily driven by staff. So any time that we go on beyond that is.
It's not to interject.
Damn it, Greg.
It was a pretty technical one.
Yeah, we appreciate you the input. I just wanted to make you aware.
So the next item I think is pretty, 5C is pretty easy overall. Michelle and Susie identified that in the descriptions in chapter 4 for growth and land use, there's not a lot of descriptions of desired trees and landscaping. And that is true. They're not. We do talk about like the desire for landscaping that's more fire adapted and that better reflects the resource outcomes we want in the resource stewardship and resilience chapter, but it's not in chapter 4. So we don't talk about street trees or plantings that are more urban. And if that is something you would like us to add, we can go back and develop a proposal for that with staff and add it. But I'm just looking for feedback is if everyone thinks that's important to include, or is what we have in here sufficient? Maybe Michelle have a few thoughts on that.
Just something to add is, as a reminder, we do have the $2.5 million grant for the Safe Streets Master Plan. So we do have a master transportation plan that's going to be looking at road types down to that kind of context level that will include landscaping. And so I think that, I guess the recommendation might be that I think part of the reason why it's vague in this plan is to give that plan to maybe be more specific as we talk about context, as we look at the land use next to the roadways. So I would just offer that as where that might come in.
I brought this idea up because it just suddenly struck me. There's nothing about trees, and I'm thinking about safe streets and people walking and waiting for buses, and there's no discussion of trees.
Yeah.
So I think the corridors are covered, like you're saying, by the Safe Streets Master Plan. But what about, urban areas where we want people to congregate? Downtown where if there was more shade, people would be out there summer. And it's just like, when we do the research, it shows that there are a lot of positive things that come out of having urban trees. I'm not talking about ponderosa pine trees. I'm talking about trees that town that provide that shade like we have in parks. So something mentioned somewhere good to me beyond what you're talking about in the Safe Streets Master Plan.
And so code already requires a certain level of like site landscaping. So depending on the underlying zoning and use, there's a certain level of landscaping that's already required. So I guess maybe to help, it would be, where are you thinking to see that? Like, is it in civic space? And that open space, is that more what you're?
Well, I was thinking that, I mean,
Okay.
civic space, but I was also thinking like even if you have trees, more people are gonna be walking outside in the summer. Through those trees. So if we want to get people out of their cars and out of their houses and out of their, seems like we should have some discussion of.
So right now, trees are covered in resource stewardship and resilience. They're not really discussed in open space, but they're kind of an understood part of parks and open space. And they're they're part of streetscapes beautification, but they're not in growth hormone use. So anyways, do you want to?
So Michelle, if we had some discussion of the benefits of trees, shade, for an environment in the narrative, would that be sufficient?
Yeah, I think that would be okay. Just so it's recognized as something that we should have. And I don't know what the zoning says for landscaping. When I think of landscaping, I think of low.
You know, there's a huge tree
What I'm
requirement.
talking about is shade.
We have a huge
Zoning talk about that.
Yeah, it's both. It's a tree slash shrub mix, so. But I still think, to your point, I think that solution is putting as a policy so we don't lose that in our zoning code.
I just don't want to lose that. And I was also struck by, that it's not in the narrative and it's not in the description of the different building blocks and it's not in the pictures. There's little tiny things, but there's, you know what I mean? So how can we make sure that people are thinking about future where it's going to be getting hotter and we want more shade?
That one, then we've got potential revisions to CAA, which is on page 3-21.
Yeah.
There's a second part to that.
There's something on chapter 7 too.
Yeah, it's 7-6.
Same time. Yeah, that's what I got from your.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
the 7-6 one.
That's just where, yeah, that's a place where it talks about the RPO and tree retention and things like that.
So
I was just pointing out that it showed up in both places, like people identified the same comment, but applied it to both of those sections.
So
do we want to talk about the resource protection overlay and the language that earned? Because
Yeah.
I think there's several of us. I think.
Several of them mentioned the 7.6 RPO.
Okay.
Okay, so, what were
Part two.
those comments? Because
Paragraph at the bottom. And it's just a matter of deleting the unintentional consequence example of contributing to the housing emergency. Because it just is uncomfortable that we're attributing the housing emergency to the RPO. And just be better. There are a lot of reasons why we have a housing emergency, just because there's an RPO.
Correct, but the RPO, there are documented cases of where the RPO kept units from being constructed.
Understood, but
Could we say that? Say it resulted in fewer units. Connected to the overall housing emergency because that's so complicated.
I think
So much beyond.
the more that I've been learning about the resource protection overlay, we have developers who are making decisions on where to put roads and homes based on trees,
Yeah.
not based on what's right for the community. Knowing that trees grow and die, homes are gonna be there a lot longer.
we're not arguing that.
So I think, I don't wanna say that it's
Yeah.
not related, like, we
No,
are
I'm saying
working
it's-
on improvements to the RPO. But right developments get built
Right.
regardless of whether there's a tree there or not.
I think that's,
That.
yeah, and I mean, what bothers you about this paragraph in particular? Because I think staff looks at this and thinks this exactly reflects our experience of applying the RPO and how we see the cumulative effects of it impacting the housing emergency. And that goes from fire to planning to housing. This is our cumulative experience of sitting at the table and trying to make this work.
It has the intentional consequence of preventing densities that would address housing shortages.
Yeah, I like that.
And so that's exactly what you're trying to say with this, rather than pulling RPO out. Yeah,
Without it being accusatory.
thank you.
Exactly.
We good with that?
That's perfect, yeah.
All right, are we ready to move on to the next one? So guys, we're gonna do this next one on CAA, is that correct?
Correct.
Which, now I've lost my place.
It's the one about carbon neutrality by 2030.
And then we're gonna take a break after this one, okay?
Is that an incentive?
You get it done, the quicker you get cookies. Anyone want to kick this off with a comment?
I brought it up. So the goal is achieve carbon neutrality for the city by 2030, reducing emissions from all sectors. And this just is the whole section is just very different. This is a land use plan. And I know that we went through this process of, land use modeling, growth modeling, and the output on that was not showing that without a lot of other measures going to it. So I just wanted to know if anybody else had a similar reaction of like being realistic. And if we are adding goals in here that go beyond land use. This one goes beyond land use. And the group of policies, and this is essentially taken right out of the carbon neutrality plan itself. I mean, this is stated in the carbon neutrality plan. So it's the relationship of the carbon neutrality plan to the regional plan, with the regional plan being the focus on the land use.
So it goes to timing, right? It says midterm as a goal. That's 7 years from the time of implementing it.
In the carbon neutrality plan?
Yeah.
What you're talking about? Yeah. So there's quite a bit more detail in the neutrality.
I mean, I have one thought, which I think addresses the latter part that you mentioned, the other part about tie in with, how do we tie tighter the land use, right? And not just get something from somewhere else. It's harder. But I mean, I think if we could say in accordance with the carbon neutrality plan, as opposed to the actual date, that gives us the flexibility to say whatever happens with the carbon neutrality plan, if and when, if it's updated, say we get to 2030 and we haven't achieved it and we push out another deadline, we don't have to change this document because the other one's changed. If we don't, then it stays being exactly the same thing, right? So that would be one suggestion there. I think about how do we tie it more into land use is a harder one, but I totally see what you're saying is kind of.
In the very first part of the regional plan, it's listed, and number 1 is climate, and weaving that into all of the goals and policies throughout this document, which I think we've done a pretty good job at doing. And we hit this, and I don't have a hard time with the concept of it. It's an important issue for me. So that's not what the space I'm coming from or the place I'm coming from. I'm coming at it from a land use perspective. And the application here in this plan.
I'm concerned about it was that the 2030 isn't that when this plan begins? Saying
2025, I hope. So 2030 is about 5 years into plan implementation for this. But it's not as far out as like 2045 or 2035 when we would be revising it again.
Does anyone have any?
It's like the use of 2030 is.
Can I say one thing, David, about your suggestion? I don't think staff would support having it say in accordance with the carbon neutrality plan, because, so the carbon neutrality plan, the housing plan, the active transportation master plan are really important guiding documents, but none of them were designed as specific plans to guide land use decisions. So they're written very programmatically, like, so they're about like programs we run and how we manage city facilities and how we manage our housing, our public housing and our vouchers, and all of those things are not really land use issues. And so I think that if we do that for one, we'd have to do it for other, we basically call them in chapter 2 other strategic plans. And they're important, but they aren't good at making land use decisions. They have some things in them that are relevant to land use decision making, but they're not designed the way like the South Side plan is or the Plaza Vieja plan, if that makes sense. So they could be tricky to put in a goal the way you described. So it's good thinking that we want to keep them tied. We don't want to lose that tie, but if you do it too much, it could make application of it more confusing than helpful.
Or you've often used real world examples of how this plan or the previous plan got used by you and other planners. Can you give us an example of this was implemented with goal CAA? Like what, I mean, what would that do in real life?
Michelle, do you want to talk about the pieces where we've had zonings and we talked about carbon neutrality?
I mean, I think that really the hospital comes to mind. And so I think having it as a goal, kind of, it's that challenge of it's in the plan. It wasn't codified. I think I'm kind of going off, kind of telling you what they already know. But that is one of the challenges, is without that being in there and being a kind of really clear goal, then it doesn't set us up for really making the significant changes we do in our zoning code that then get reflected in not just things that go through a discretionary review. And discretionary review is anything that requires a planning and zoning or a city council approval, but then also helps us make sure that our by right developments also are having those attributes. And so as we go through our large code analysis project, that's one of the things we're looking at, is looking at how do we update our code so that it helps achieve our carbon neutrality goals as well as our housing goals. And so there's that kind of that whole conversation about the trade-offs for both of those things, and trade-offs being, some things may be important even if it adds cost. Other things we might say that's a cost that we just can't afford to put on housing. And then there's also the things where it might just be like, we think it adds a cost, but it doesn't. And so I think it's really important as we move forward, and not just our rezoning cases, but on an everyday level of having that kind of guidance to really help us update all of our codes to reflect the community's values and the goals of that. Does that kind of help get you what you were?
As close as it's going to, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can talk about some of the zoning stuff with like the hospital and stuff, but that's a little too arbitrary. Like this just gets to the point of what we're trying to do with it.
So you're saying if that's not in here, then you're not doing that?
I think it's, in some ways we're not, yeah. I mean, it's telling us that that's not a priority and that's not a goal.
What enough guidance? It's how we see it from the sustainability perspective of, if it's not here, where is it? And so that's sort of our proposal.
Because we only have certain policies from the carbon neutrality plan that are part of the regional plan. So that goal is the one that tells us to move in that direction. They say that we wouldn't do it in any way, shape or form, no, but I don't know that we'd be doing it in a meaningful of a way that we're trying to move forward with.
Hospital idea speaks to me for sure, because it seems like if they would have been in line with what the community's goal and vision was, then they wouldn't have had such a problem as they did. They pulled all this stuff out at the last minute once they heard the request from the community. If that was part of their guiding document to begin with, we might have a new hospital out there.
Well, they didn't provide a white paper, so we really didn't know what we were gonna pay for. They said the taxpayers weren't gonna pay anything, and that wasn't correct. So people aren't that dumb. You have to provide a white paper. Problem as well.
Is there a sense of what, maybe you might have heard the concerns?
I'm,
Do you have anything, yeah, do you have anything like to add or about the language or how it might he was bringing up, which is like, how do we deal with it? Over time and from the land use perspective, and could it be narrowed or could it be changed in a way that would still meet the need here?
Specific to land use. It's really.
Or does somebody else have a suggestion, I guess, too?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be open to that. I'm happy to, kind of talk about our perspective here. And again, Jenny Neiman, Climate Action Section Director. And there's a couple things, so I'll just try to go one by one. The timing issue, there's also a goal in the regional plan about like maintaining, water supply and demand. And climate action is actually the same. It's how much we emit, carbon neutrality is the same. It's about how much we emit in emissions and how we balance that out, which with policy that, well, in our case, it's carbon dioxide removal. Right? So how do we maintain carbon neutrality, right? It's just a balance. It's a scale. And so it's a math problem is what I try to say to folks of like, it's hard, I know, but it's really a math problem. And so that for us is completely a land use thing. And I know I think there was a comment too about all sectors. I told Sarah today, I wish that climate action was not involved in all sectors. I would sleep so much more, right? It is not us that have said climate action has to be in all sectors. It is just the scientific climate of it all, right? Is we have to take every step we can in every single way to do it, to get to our goals. And so we have to look at literally every way that we cause emissions, which is literally everything. Really fun at parties, I know. And so that is why that does say all sectors. And again, you cannot take action as a community without looking at all sectors, basically, on a national level. On the timing perspective, I'm sorry, I got distracted, but that really goes back to the math, right? After 2030, we just need to maintain carbon neutrality. So it's not that we get to carbon neutrality and then we're done, but that we actually get to carbon neutrality by 2030 and then we maintain carbon neutrality. Our carbon neutrality sort of equation in 2030 is about half reducing emissions and half carbon dioxide removal. So actually pulling carbon dioxide out of the air. We hope that after 2030, we actually continue to reduce emissions more, right? And we have to pay to pull less carbon out of the air. That math equation will change a little bit, but the goal is the same. And so if we are happy to, entertain things like, and maintain carbon neutrality past 2030, but it's essentially a steady state that we're trying to maintain with that math equation, if that helps. So, yeah, I don't know if that was helpful, but I wanted to just share a little bit of what Sarah and I had talked about. From our perspective, it's incredibly a land use issue because it's kind of an everything issue and it relates to most things already in this plan.
I'm okay with moving it forward the way that it sits, but I really trust Ms. Leeds' commentary when it comes to her expertise. So I'm not challenging you.
No, we can let it go. I just, I see how the regional plan is used. How the goals are to support use to not support. So I just want to be careful about how we frame things and make sure that we're being specific to land use. So allowing people opportunity. That's where I was coming from, but I clearly am, I think I'm one of the only ones here and I don't want to waste anybody's time on this one. We can move on.
So your concern is mainly that it's kind of duplicative and just not in the right space.
My concern is that the land use models that we have reviewed demonstrate this. The way to achieve it goes well beyond land use. And we're having a very broad goal that then anything that moves forward has to be supported by this. So you have to have findings when you have a case And it would be very difficult to have a finding that you're achieving carbon neutrality by 2030 in a case. That's my concern.
Thank you for making that clear for me.
Specific development decision.
In a specific development. That's, thank you for helping me articulate that. That's where I'm coming from. And it has nothing to do with wanting to have, to achieve this goal. That's not what that's about. It's to be clear about where I stand on it. But like I said, if I'm the only one that's reading it this way, I don't want to waste people's time here.
Anybody support Julie's comment?
Just have the same basic question. Isn't it a contradiction to say by 2030 in the plan 2045? Isn't that just a verbal contradiction? Shouldn't it be worded something like what you said, continuation of the carbon neutrality plan? Rather than achieving carbon neutrality by 2030?
It seems like the county policy actually is written in a way that when I read this counties, it says support and advance Coconino County's climate goals and policies designed to address, respond to climate change. Understanding better what your concern is, I do feel like that could be a more succinct policy, and then it's gonna be in the, the implementation standards. I guess, Jenny, would that be a way that we could write that? And so instead of saying the county's climate goals and policies, the city's goals and policies?
With all due respect to the county, that was created because the county does not have climate goals. And so that would feel like a big step backwards to us from a current regional plan that has our climate goals. It is up to y'all. That is how we would see that.
So could changing goal CAA to say achieve and maintain carbon neutrality for the city and striking by 2030 and just leaving the rest of it intact? That kind of removes the year because this is the only goal with like a year target in it essentially. But I think it means the same-ish thing.
Yeah, that makes plenty of sense to me.
What was that wording then?
Achieve and maintain. Elsa's getting it on the screen. Carbon neutrality for the city by 2030 by reducing emissions from all sectors.
I think we need the maintain.
I'm sorry, we took out by 2030.
I think we need the maintain part. Achieved it. It's done.
You have to maintain it, then land use.
That was Jenny's wording.
Yeah, Jenny was saying we have to actually maintain it over time too.
I think I kind of liked what Michelle was saying though, about combining the two, so not replacing them. So support and advance the city of Flagstaff's climate goals and policies designed to achieve carbon neutrality for the city by reducing emissions. Combines both of them and makes it sound much more like it's an overarching goal for the community as a whole, as opposed to saying, when you rezone this must achieve.
We didn't hear that was cool.
Yeah.
So.
I did, it's all right. I want to be clear, it's not my decision. I was responding to Michelle's language and I might have misheard that. Pretty bad. But I didn't hear carbon neutrality in there, but.
I didn't say carbon neutrality. That's why.
That's why I had an issue with that. Yeah, David was saying something.
So let me read
He was
back
kind of
what I
combining,
think
I
I heard.
think.
When I read back what I think I heard David say, which was support and advance the city's carbon neutrality goals and policies by reducing emissions in all sectors and just mirror the format essentially.
I guess I'm just concerned that we're losing that word achieve.
Maybe achieve and
We
advance.
haven't got there yet. So if we just say support and advance,
We can't just achieve it through the land use plan. I think that's one
Yeah.
of the challenges. I think that's a little bit of the concern I'm hearing from some people in this group is that the way it's written kind of implies that a development would have to achieve carbon neutrality and it's putting so I think the way when I heard Julie explain her concern, I do understand that. And And I do think it puts us in a weird spot. And so I like how it's been rewritten from an implementation standpoint.
My suggestion did not take the word achieve out. So it said support and advance cities' climate goals and climate goals to achieve carbon neutrality.
Good.
Climate goals to achieve carbon neutrality.
By reducing emissions.
So that, to me, like if I were thinking about a case where Genevieve and I, it's usually Genevieve who's on the line tonight, we're evaluating a proposal and we were looking at it and saying, does it, our goal as a city is to achieve carbon neutrality. Does this support and advance that? That's how it would say, does it do enough in emission reduction that it's supporting and advancing our carbon neutrality goals, or do we think there needs to be more emission reduction for that to move?
Do you think the language that David proposed, what you just said?
Yeah, so his was support and advance the city's climate goals to achieve carbon neutrality by reducing emissions in all sectors. So if I were sitting there with Genevieve at a table and we were looking at a development case, we could say, okay, how much are they reducing emissions? And is that enough that it's supporting and advancing the carbon neutrality goals of the city? And that's what we would build our finding around. And if we thought it was inadequate, we'd have to have a rationale as to why they're not doing these things, which could further reduce their emissions and would help us further advance this. Or they are doing these things which help. Located in an infill location versus a location on the edge of town. Those are the kinds of things. We need to build more business practices and policies on how to do that. That's what the big shift is about and many other things we're working on. But so Jenny, what are your thoughts? I could see how to do that.
I struggle a little bit, and this is just me, I want to be clear, but as a practitioner here, we pulled a bunch of goals kind of in thinking about this conversation. And I think that the idea that like, well, a development can't do that on its own can be applied to probably half the goals in this plan. Maximizing affordability and creating a vibrant and diverse economy, and supporting the area's economic vitality, and and promoting a variety of transportation modes. We know that many of our developments don't do that, and so I struggle with this conversation because I understand that, and I also understand that as a very significant weakening of the policy or of the goal as it is right now, just on its face. That might be okay, and that is the committee's decision to decide, but it's my job to raise that. This is a much weaker policy. And so I struggle because so many goals in the plan. We looked at this and kind of said, wait a second, like this actually feels like a lot of these goals are these aspirational goals, right? And one development, I think there was one about, working across government services. And it's like, well, that's not a land use thing either, right? And so I'm not critiquing the plan. I just don't think that this goal is the only one in that situation. And I will say, I understand that land use doesn't get us there. My job is to move us in the direction of our climate goals in every single way that as we can, as much as we can. Sarah and I had a good conversation about 6 months ago, and I was like, well, we have to do more over here. We have to do more vehicle electrification because land use won't catch up enough. And my world, my math equation is, oh, no, we're way behind on vehicle electrification, right? We're way behind on home energy retrofits. Everything is hard. Again, I'm not fun at parties. Everything about climate action is incredibly, incredibly difficult. And so there's no easy button. And so you all don't see a ton maybe of emissions reductions from the land use modeling. I see a ton. I'm like, oh, great. This is great. This is as good as we can get. Because we kind of need to eke every single emissions thing out of that. And I should say too, I have reduced this all to a math equation. And the evidence is that all of these things for climate action are far, far, far on the positive side of the ledger from a financial standpoint, for a community, for a health standpoint, all these things. And so my reduction probably isn't fair there.
We have two potential rewordings on the screen. If you can make it bigger, so that'd be better to get rid of the navigation and amp the view up.
Alrighty, guys, I want to put it to a vote. So we're gonna vote for either the first one up there that's currently reads CAA, or you can,
Column 1 and 2.
yeah, which will be number 1, or you can vote for number 2, which is the one which is all in underlined.
There'd be also a vote for eliminating it completely. For that. Thank you.
Is there any way we could give these two suggestions to the sustainability folks, have them figure out what would make the most sense in terms of reaching the goals of the neutrality plan?
Well, I mean, I just think we just heard.
Out of our element of making changes that may not be effective for meeting our needs. You know, I mean, we can put something forward, but it may not be the best thing. That's what I would suggest, is we just give these two to the sustainability folks and let them decide, and then maybe they could come back, not that we're meeting, but they could send us a memo that says, here's what we think. We've thought about your ideas.
I don't know if that achieves our goals. I mean, if Julie's suggesting that she wants something different. To them and saying,
Giving some proposals for something. We said we're gonna do the carbon neutrality plan, this the regional plan, right? We can't not do that. City has adopted it. They say that we're gonna follow what the carbon neutrality plan says. If we put something in that's weaker than that, that's not following the carbon neutrality plan. So why get into that issue and having to amend the plan later? We have a very intelligent sustainability staff that can please tell us what they think about these.
I don't know.
Jenny just did
I
that.
think Jenny just told us what she thought. She wants it to basically stay.
I think I think I heard, may I summarize what I think I heard you say? And then you'll tell me whether I did it or well or not, is that their first choice would be leave it as is. And the second choice would be the one that's number 1 up there. They don't support number 2 because it's a weaker wording of the 3. Is that correct?
I'm fine with the maintain change and taking out the art. I think that that's fine. I think that increases consistency. I did not actually register an opinion. I just said that it is a weakening. And that, I think that's clear. Again, like, that's my job to say, from a policy perspective, that's a weaker policy. And that's okay. That's y'all's decision.
So let's do a vote. So everyone who preferred number 1, if you can raise your hand.
Folks online, just put 1 or 2 in the chat, please.
Everyone who prefer number 2, if you can raise your hands.
Y'all are no help. All right, tiebreakers are online. It was 5 and 5 in the room.
See that, right?
I think so. They can't.
Lucy, are you trying to speak?
I'm trying to chat.
I saw her thing going.
Jenny wanted us to keep language as is. I hate to say a third option. Yeah, every one of the things we both. We're talking about, these are both changes.
Right.
I thought about that too. What about the leave as is?
Leave as is.
Well, right now, number 1 is in the lead online, so maybe we could say leave as is or number 1 and do another quick round.
That would be.
Right now, it's 7 to 5 versus.
I don't think you want I don't think you want that vote. Third party spoiler if you did that.
Whatever.
It would make both away from number 1 and then number 2 would win. If you had 3 others. So number one is everyone online voted?
7-5, number one.
Number one wins, and we're gonna take a break, guys. I'll come back in 10 minutes.
Thank you.
So.
Hopefully we'll get through the next couple. How you doing? You got my email? Oh, great. I thought Friday.
It is. It is. It's an emergency notification. If I have an emergency, it'll tell you.
I can hear you now. Hi, everybody online. Can you hear us okay?
Yes, yes.
You, Dirk.
Yes.
All right, everyone, we are gonna get back to it. Let's have every, is anyone still outside in the hallway?
Do we have one? Shut that door if you would.
I just got my, okay.
All right, everybody, if we could finish up the conversations, we're gonna get started again. We are,
How you work that?
we're on actually the second half of 5D, but Paul wants people to like him, so he said that we don't have to talk about it.
Yes.
And then I think for item E, Julie also wants people to like her, / feels like she took up a lot of time with the last one. So we're gonna skip E too.
I just didn't get it, but that's just me, so I'm up.
I think
I've rewritten that one twice. I'll try and rewrite it again.
the last time was based on your suggestion too.
Tough one.
Right, so we're gonna move on to F, which is reclaimed water comments, which I got. Here's page 9-6, so this is within the narrative portion, not with Wilson.
Yes.
I don't know how I feel about that, so hopefully.
Well, yeah, there's some things that were in comments about adding things about reclaimed water, and I know Lee's here to kind of answer some of these questions a little bit.
Showing up just to listen, but I'll try my best.
Yeah, but and maybe Aaron, I think is still on too. Is Aaron still? Yeah.
I'm here, Sarah.
Good. So two things is one, there was a lot of questions about reclaimed water language, but then also some suggestions about having additional review for reclaimed water or like checking its availability more frequently. And then several comments about what some additional language. Sorry, one of these is on 916. I maybe misspoke. Maybe it says 9.6. It should have been 916. But it included a statement that there's uncommitted reclaimed water rather than excess. And they said, could more of that be used to meet ecosystem needs and to address PFAS? I think those were some of the comments from what we were sent in that were most relevant, but you guys wrote the comments. I assume you kind of remember them. So largely it seemed like getting reclaimed water more available for ecosystem health and conservation. That was mentioned by several people. Then also maybe increasing the frequency of review of what we're using our reclaimed water for. Were the two things that
I think I said the last one. More contracts?
Sorry, what was that?
Thinking more of the contracts, like review the contracts more often.
It's pretty procedural.
Right, it is, and yeah, I'd be interested in hearing what Aaron has to say about that. Was really focused on the idea of the value of water changing over time. How going into long contracts may affect our hands elsewhere, but it may not be appropriate here if it's procedural. Where would it be? I just kind of wanted to hear what Aaron said to say about that. I think the other parts about ecosystem, that's really Rick's. Rick did a good summary of. So.
Well, I was looking some kind of a commitment in water. You don't mean very much, I mean a very small amount. But we're already doing it. After I've written this, I thought of a couple more examples. Now, I know maintaining Francis Short Pond. Hose flow, the culvert. proposed for it to go from Francis Short all the way down to City Hall. It'd be a second example. In both the Bobcat plant and in the rear of the flag plant. We're gonna buy flow below those over time. I think that's important. I'd like to see a commitment made to it. City, I'm not sure this is the right place for it, but it might be. There's a lot of value in it. And the conservation. Probably enough of me.
Erin, I saw you turned your camera on. Do you want to address either or both of those elements? The value of reclaimed water changing over time versus our long-term contracts, and then the commitment to conservation-based use of our water.
Hi, Sarah, and hi, everyone. Michelle and Rick. I could try real quick. The reclaimed agreements are anywhere from 5 to 20 years long. And that, is procedural and what could be addressed in our water services, water policies. There might be something in city code. I think the only thing is city code is that they're approved by the director of water services. So I don't know if I think the regional plan could say what you all wanted it to, and then we would incorporate that into a discussion on updating the water policies. And I would say the same thing to Rick's wanting to focus on, just adding some riparian water from the reclaimed system, maybe at more locations around town or continuing what we're already doing. That could be a discussion then had when water policies are revisited. I don't know if that is a good coordination between the regional plan and water policy, but that's what comes to mind if it's helpful.
I think what I heard you say, Michelle, is that in the first part, you're thinking about like the value that we might sign a long-term contract, but over time, our reclaimed water is valuable. I think it's important to know that if we stopped providing reclaim to a customer, they still might want to use water for that purpose, and they might switch over to drinking water. So I don't think it's always a bad thing to have a long-term contract, because it can ensure that they're not switching over and using drinking water for irrigation purposes, which is usually what we see, but also it, like if what you're thinking about is that we're missing something associated with value and like maximizing the value of the water we're using, is that kind of what you're thinking?
Maximizing value in terms of what monetary, like if we're selling to a golf course, maybe we decide as a city, we don't really want to sell that much of the water to the golf course. I'm just using this as an example. And maybe we could put more into the wash so that the trees, not that that's a good example, but so that the trees survive. So, it's value in terms of maybe beyond itself. Like I said, it came from something I was watching the Water Commission meeting. Aaron said something. Change in value, and that's what made us think of this. So, yeah. It sounds like from what Aaron's saying, we could just add some language in. Talks about when water policies are revisited in terms of looking at reclaimed water for the ecosystems, right?
So it's kind of the same comment, like you and your comment and Rick's comment are meant to like achieve the same aim, correct?
Related, but
they're related.
This is more direct and mine is more like thinking about the future, being ready to.
I also made a couple of small comments along the line of Michelle was talking about working on groundwater recharge and our ability to treat the water before it's put back in the ground.
Yeah, and I suggested some language for that too. We're on the same page.
Are you guys comfortable with turning it over to Sarah and Elsa to find the right place to close out? I don't know where it would go.
Work with Erin, because it sounds like she.
Yeah, we could work,
Good ideas about where.
we could work with Erin over the next week to find a spot to kind of make sure we've shored this. I wouldn't say it's like adding a new concept, but how to shore it up so that it's clearer and doesn't look like a gap. Because I think we've intended that to be included, right? Doesn't feel like something we missed, but maybe it's not coming through clear enough.
Wasn't clear to me.
I could,
So I think the recap I would have is that we want to have language that discusses the use of reclaimed water and its possibility for conservation, both for riparian areas and groundwater recharge.
And, yeah, and being able to revisit those
Yeah.
allocations.
Yeah.
if I could, so perhaps when you generate that language, I was responsible for, made some comments on the same lines. So perhaps Michelle and Rick and Paul could comment on the language. I think it's very important. I guess one thing to remember is that if you give zero water for riparian areas in June and July, that's okay. Our ecosystems have evolved with dry summers. So it's not like we're asking, put water out all the time. We have a lot of flexibility that won't be so expensive. And I think I would love to have a quantitative goal of, 1%. What fraction of your enormous benefits could accrue from our use of resources. We have very so it cost us nothing.
I'm going to state that the city does have contractual obligations with Game and Fish and other organizations to keep Friendly Short Pond full and to provide this canyons downstream from the rest of the plant.
Way in 4 years, so we have to.
We've talked with them and yeah, it's in the works.
Yeah, so I would like something in there that would make it really likely that we're not going to just let that go until our contract's over.
No, we were just reviewing contracts about 3 weeks ago and the direction we're going to go with it. And I believe we're supposed to put 50 gallons per minute down Picture Canyon at a minimum. And same with the discharge at Rio de Flag. So yeah, if it's something that's important to the community, then we will keep that in mind.
What's your name?
Oh, Lee Williams. I'm with Operations Section Director of Water Services.
Lee Williams?
Yeah.
We'll get to know each other. Thank you.
Land of water. Alrighty, so as everyone recall, we're gonna move on to item G.
No, this is Susie.
That's Susie.
Yeah, we've got the one thing that I had mentioned. It's on page 915. Second bullet says incentivize permeable pavements. It says where the soil and climate conditions are appropriate in design standards to reduce runoff. And I wanted to add after pavements or other surfaces, because there's other surfaces besides pavements that are permeable. So
Sure.
I wanted to add that. And then also where it says to reduce runoff, I wanted to add to that as well. Add also to minimize contaminants from urban runoff, to protect surface water quality, and to allow water to penetrate into the soil.
Was that already in your comments, Susie? Or is
Yes.
that a new comment? Okay.
No, it was in my comments.
We can pull that from your comments. So
Okay.
we didn't get to this part of the agenda yet, but I mentioned at the beginning that if we don't talk about it in this meeting, we are still going to look at and respond and incorporate the rest of the comments. We're just.
Okay,
we
I thought
have
it was,
time.
I thought it was under the agenda, under the F, but anyway, it's okay.
So we're gonna go to water resources and treatment. Yeah, an idea of what these were, sir.
So there were several comments about PFAS in particular, that, folks wanted to have better, felt there was some, I don't know if I would describe them as gaps. Maybe the people who made the comments can discuss how they felt about it, but, and also on like the advanced water treatment and, having, projects that support water treatment of pharmaceuticals and chemicals, and future technologies. So folks who made those comments want to talk about them a little?
I'll go. Basically, what I wanted to do was ask the city to commit to continuing research. I don't know if research is the right word, because it's more application based than what most research. Continue to stay up on that stuff and move ahead with it. When we talked about the groundwater recharge, one of the things we kept running into, people that were concerned because of the chemicals that were going down in the ground with that water. So the things linked together. And I think it's important for the city to stay up on what's happening and find a way forward.
I agree strongly, and I will say that I was at a 2-hour meeting today at the Babbitt Drive water treatment plant, and the city is very serious about this. We'll see where we go, but they talked for 2 hours about wanting to do great things, and I was very pleased. You know, it's almost impossible. The only way to really deal with PFAS is to outlaw them, not putting it into the environment. It costs me 100 times what we're doing here, because we won't tell people you can't buy a Teflon pan. But in Maine and California, they're doing that, and it's going to cost 1% of what we're doing in Arizona, because we can't tell people not to put PFAS in the water. So we're in a wreck. Eventually, that's what we need. The city is really there. Not to say we're going to win, but their heart is in the right place.
Others on this one? I know, Michelle, you were the other person.
One is, this is page 14. So it's a different one, than what you said, but it relates to water quality and PFAS and watersheds and stormwater. It's water quality. What I was thinking about is, this is really detailed. Nice if somewhere there was a way to address water quality at sewer treatment plants in terms of how they treat the solid waste. Because that's just lying on the ground, filtering through into the groundwater. At least that's what I've heard. And I know there's discussions about building a new one, but come up with some way of not letting that PFAS get into the system. That was one of my many comments. Others have been covered.
Aaron or Lee?
Sarah,
Yes.
are you looking for the comment or the mention?
Yeah, so the language I think that I've heard is that they'd like to see some language on staying up to date with the technology to treat our sewer water. And then Shell is looking for something related to the solids. And
I thought there was language in there from the last version that addressed keeping up to speed on technology and you know, we're regulated to do advanced sampling anyway on
Yeah,
emerging issues.
we have the follow the local, state and federal guidelines for stormwater.
Michelle, are you getting at a comment related to source water protection or sewer shed protection of PFAS from industry?
Yeah, industry for sure, but I was thinking more of just our own treatment plants, how they treat the solids now.
you asking for an explanation on how we're currently doing it?
No, how can you change it so it doesn't go, that doesn't get into the system?
Yeah.
From what you're doing now.
Yeah, complicated question. Yeah, and I don't know, I'm completely ready to speak on that, but we are looking at alternatives to solids handling right now. We're currently doing the digesting and land applying. The talk today was the engineer was a proponent of land application. There's other things that you can do with it. You can incinerate it, but the PFAS then vaporize and go into the atmosphere. You can put it through a pyrolysis unit, which destroys some of the PFAS, but not all of the PFAS. There's a lot of operational issues with pyrolysis units. And there's gasification. And similar to PFAS, there's a lot of operational issues. There's been 5 or so plants installed around the country, 5 PFAS or 5 gasification and 5 pyrolysis. And a few of them have already been taken out of operation because of issues with the technology. So it's an emerging technology and we're looking at it, but the city of Flagstaff doesn't have any current plans.
And I kind of fits into that idea of just getting up to speed on what's happening with emerging technology. So not just for the water, but for the solids too.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah.
We're definitely exploring options.
So also put up the policies that are in the document, which are kind of related to this, but maybe they're missing the words emerging technology. Which is a thing I heard Lee say, which maybe gets at what three of you were looking for here.
You know, and emerging technologies are great, but if they're not being applied somewhere on a regular basis and working, technologies can also backfire. So for a community and create a new problem, some other contaminant that is a product of the emerging technologies. So it's very tricky to get very specific, I feel like, in the regional plan, or specific with what water quality issues are health concerns. It's bigger than PFAS. There are basic metals that could be a health concern, or I just wanted to throw that out as advice to maybe if we could come out of the weeds somehow, and we want tried and proven technologies. That's what we want to implement that we know work. So
it's clear that every technology has consequences. So some things that work well use so much energy, we're going to torpedo our climate goals. So there is no good solution right now, except to ban these PFAS from our stores and things we buy.
That's definitely outside the scope of the region.
It's a big bad problem that we don't have answered.
So we do talk about that water adequacy includes technological solutions. We talk about developing our facilities so that we're providing safe, reliable, and cost-effective wastewater treatment. I know those don't get at the technology side, but maybe the technology is too much of a tool to be part of a goal or policy. But I hear that you're like, we're gonna wonder. And I mean, it is just a business practice, and maybe it's just because we're a leading edge kind of city on these kinds of things, but it is a business practice of water services to stay up to date on those things. But also maybe too many steps removed from the regional plan. Could we move forward with no change on this?
When I read the regional plan, that's what I was thinking as well, or this portion of the regional plan. And then when I read the comments, I tried to test every comment against the plan, which was really hard to do in the time that I did. But when I got to this one, that's what I had in mind as well. I was like, well, none of this to me seems regional planning, and I have faith in what I know of the water department. But
Yeah, I think, what's coming down for me is just preventing the contamination of surface water and groundwater. So I was suggesting putting in something like this, exploration of different technologies. Do that. So,
Like as an action item?
yeah,
I think I could work with Aaron.
I think they're already doing it. So having it in here will be helpful.
And include Lee Williams, our dedicated water treatment expert in that, Sarah, and we can.
Hide him. I've got eye contact with him, Aaron. I won't let him hand it off to you.
Hey, guys, we did all right the time, but not fantastic. There was there a second half to this? G?
No.
No, okay. So we're gonna move on to H, which is wildland fire suppression.
Bill and Paul are here.
Specifically, this is on pages 3, section 3-16 and 3-22.
Yeah, I had two items here, both dealing with wildfire that I put forward. Realized, oh, hold on, we have a call. Sorry.
It has to happen to somebody.
Yes. Realize I'm the lone voice in the wilderness on this topic, but I think it's important, so I keep bringing it up. I see climate action in Flagstaff as a three-legged stool. Carbon neutrality for sure, but wildfire and flooding as the two other legs of this stool. You can go back to climate action and adaptation plan. That's clearly stated there. We recently had the county report, study report on by J.E. Fuller and the university telling us that we had a potential of losing 2,000 buildings damaged or destroyed by flooding, the result of previous wildfire, almost $3 billion in damage and so forth. So we have a clear and distinct threat, Flagstaff, from wildfire and flooding. Yet, when I look at the whole document on climate action, that three-legged stool, carbon neutrality gets about 80% of the attention. And maybe 10% for fire and 10% for flooding. So my two items here are trying to get in a little small way, more attention devoted to what I see as the most immediate threats to us and the ones that we should be focusing the majority of our attention on. The carbon neutrality is a long range, out in the distance effort to turn the tide on global warming. And it started big time with the first Paris Agreement in 2015 and has been progressing ever since. What is the purpose of carbon neutrality? Is to reduce the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere. I think we all agree on that, right? By reducing the CO2 in the atmosphere, we reduce the greenhouse effect, less CO2 to capture IR radiation trying to get back into space. Well, how have we done so far? We haven't. This is, I'm sorry it's so small, but the essence of it, everybody can see. This is a graph of the global monthly mean CO2 concentration in our atmosphere, global monthly mean, taken from the Mauna Kea Atmospheric Observatory on the Big Island. The little vertical line here represents 2015. That's the year of the Paris Agreement. What can you see here? Even though it's so far away, you can all see that it's a linear increase over time without any deviation. It's going up, it has gone up, and it continues to go up. And everything that we have done locally, our millions of dollars spent in Flagstaff, the billions spent in the US, and the trillions spent worldwide have not deflected this increase one iota.
I've given it 4 minutes. This sounds like a political rant. Does this have anything to do with?
The point is that we have a three-legged stool and we're devoting 80% of it to carbon neutrality. I am just hopeful that these two little items here to increase our firefighting capability locally to try and save Flagstaff from the devastation. We just saw I mean, we've all seen what's going on in North Carolina now. That could happen in Flagstaff.
Yeah, I mean, Tom, I
So
don't,
I've got these two items here. I put them forward. I'll call for the question and you can just have a discussion or vote up and down.
I don't disagree. I think you defeat your own argument through the references to the carbon neutrality plan.
I didn't say that we should not have a carbon.
No, I'm just saying, I think you should just.
What is effective and what can help? What can really help is to work on firefighting.
Yeah, so, yeah, point being is I think that increasing our ability to fight wildfire, protect our community is a good thing. And I would, as a piece of advice, I would say, stop talking about the carbon neutrality plan and just talk about that.
That's what I'd like all of us to do.
So,
I agree with that.
So I think you've got PS4 and PS2 here as your kind of two things is what we got into the agenda. They seem kind of the same, to be honest. They're both about expanding firefighting capability and capacity. No, I sincerely don't have a problem. Think that we've got for in here where we're talking about mitigating hazards to reduce the risk of uncharacteristic wildfire. I think that is actually different, is meaningfully different from using our capacity for fighting it once it happens. I'd be on board with adding.
The narrative of we gotta get better at putting out fires is what's caused the crisis that we're living in. We've had this conversation with you, Tom, many times. The catastrophic fires that have happened in Flagstaff had nothing to do with how quickly we got there or how quickly we knew about it, other than literally within minutes. No satellite, no drone is gonna get there on a red flag day and put that thing out within 3 minutes, 5 minutes. So the catastrophic fires that have negatively impacted our community, new technology, we're talking about a few people who think satellites in space are gonna make a difference. It's not for the city of Flagstaff. Other communities, maybe. It's not gonna make a difference for Flagstaff. Faster drones, the fires we're not catching on our windy days where you're not gonna be able to fly a drone. We're catching fires on non-windy days just fine. It's the alignment of wind and topography and the reality that we built an entire community at the base of a mountain that for thousands of years has been burning and flooding. This isn't a new thing, okay? So I think we need to take some context in the words we're using, that when you say we need more firefighters, the way we're gonna protect our community with more firefighters is not by putting out more fires, it's by starting more fires. We can't suppress our way out of this.
I respectfully disagree with that. Absolutely, it's planning.
So what I have a question for the fire department is the two things that David was referencing, is that language that works best for what you guys want to do?
I don't think our survival depends on rapidly detecting and suppressing wildfires. Our survival depends on better learning how to live with a fire adapted ecosystem.
I totally agree. I have never disagreed, never said any, what I'm talking about is where the great lack is. And we have, I mean, our fire trucks driving around, they're old and antiquated fire trucks. We have, your fire department is undermanned significantly. The chief told me that himself.
You're talking about the structure, EMS firefighters, or the wildland fire? They're two different things.
Yeah, I think he said that about structure, I've not heard him say that about wildland fire before.
And to say that new, I mean, okay, your background is firefighting. My background is the Navy. 2 destroyers in the Red Sea just knocked down 50 missiles and drones coming out.
I'm gonna stop this right now. We're not talking.
Just saying new technology.
During this conversation.
Technology is available.
We're not talking about anything like that. We're gonna get to the question.
You're absolutely.
There is a line in here about empowering staff to be good at what they do. As far as I'm concerned.
So we're not,
says.
what is the current, so I'm asking staff, what is the current language?
I was just pulling that up. Give me just a second.
Okay, that's what we need to focus on, is the words that are written, the changes that are made, input from the fire department and input from the committee. It should take less than 3 minutes.
Mitigate hazards to reduce the risk of uncharacteristic wildfires and post-fire flooding while improving the health, structure, condition, function, and resilience of our forests through forestry best practices and wildland fire science.
Pretty good.
I don't know what,
Don't want any more, you don't want any more.
I know where you're coming from with this idea, Tom, that people are out there telling us that satellites and drones are gonna fix our fire problem. That's just not.
It's like saying I want to operate with a wire phone and I want to have black and white TV.
Thousands of people, they are
Just saying,
in this
oh,
area for tens of thousands of years.
So we're on that question, and does everybody agree that that's good wording? What's in there now? I guess we should have a show of hands.
I'm actually looking for another, there's another related one to this.
All right, all right.
I do want to bring up that the only area in the plan where we are talking about expanding workforce and technology are really the, this fire topic and transportation. So just to be clear, there's a narrow set of things, but we do have implementation guideline to expand and expedite forest restoration and risk mitigation to reduce urban and neighborhood fire risks more effectively, which is, I think, what Neil is pointing to. But we also talk about to the right. On page 322. Yes. We also do have something on 322. And to it quickly. We do also have continually assess the location and capacity of firefighting resources to adapt to wildfire and multi-story building responses as the community grows. So we have this, let's keep looking at location and capacity because we have decided at the previous meeting that saying we're going to expand our workforce or expand technology was outside of the scope of the plan, and that location and capacity. So plan we drew many meetings ago. If that's where we went back, I think in July or we were discussing this.
Just to give some more context. If we had 100 more firefighters, the day of the tunnel fire, the day of the pipeline fire, the day of the Schultz fire, nothing would have been different.
We say that the example that we saw about the lightning strike the other day is a great example of how a fire is responded to on a nice day.
Exactly.
I've seen that same response close to town and it didn't spread at all.
I mean, if I'm hearing from you guys that you don't want.
Well, we do, but not in the context of out fires, because we're pretty damn good at it most of the time. Like I said, topography and wind, those are the areas we're trying to focus on with treatments and telling people they can't have fires in those areas. That doesn't work. Telling them they can't camp in those areas. That seems to be working better. So it's really the human space that we're dealing with here around how do we keep those fires from starting in the first place that will be our return on investment.
And they expand, and that's why the language is expand and expedite forest restoration and risk mitigation.
Yes.
So I think that the fire department has the words it would like in here. And
We're not closing the door to anything being innovative.
You are closing the door. You're saying that you only want half
Or innovation for suppression.
You don't want to admit that any new technology could come.
That's not at all what I said.
Well, you're not willing to put it in.
In the sense of a context to put out the fires, not likely to change.
We're saying a race to suppress it has already failed. 10 a.m. rule in 1933, the science has proven that to be ineffective. We're not going to do that anymore.
You have a study by J.E. Fuller and university said if we have a Schultz fire on the west side of the peaks, that we're going to have $2 billion, almost $3 billion in damage and lose 2,000 buildings. It's going to look like North Carolina.
So you're saying we need better investments in flood control, not fire.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, so.
What are we missing here? I mean, we've got one side of town, massive flood control. The other side that
You're only willing to look at half of the problem.
So
Also,
Online has their hand up.
sorry, but someone else, please.
go ahead. I just had my, we've known that there's billions of dollars in costs dating back to a 2014 city study as well. That's not new data.
Dirk, do you want to make one last comment? And I think we're gonna make a push to move on.
What do I got nothing to lose. Hello, it's Dirk. Can I chime in on this?
You bet.
Okay, so Dirk Thorne, fire chief, retired. 35 years of fighting fire in northern Arizona. I have been on every major wildfire in northern Arizona since 1986. I will tell you that this becomes a non-issue for a land use plan. Think about CAL FIRE, one of probably the largest fire department in the country, who has jurisdiction over wildfire and structure fire. And they just burned, Neil, you may have to help me with this. How many acres? 500,000 acres of fire in California this year under CAL FIRE's jurisdiction.
Is that wildfire or prescribed fire, Dirk?
The wildfires that they've just been fighting, the line fire, the park fire, all of them.
Over a million.
Right? So tons of acres of fire from the largest wildland fire department, right? Not the federal government, largest fire department in the country. And they can't control their fires. Wildfire. I just think it's a non-issue for a land use plan. We do our best with code, with fire adapted community development when we build new developments. We do our best we can with that. And quite frankly, and I think, Neil, as you were saying, when the wind and the fuels and the topography line up correctly, you get out of the way because there's nothing you can do about it until the wind stops, until the fuels change, or till the topography changes. We cannot support in the city and in the fire districts surrounding the city enough people to do what we would need to do, right, to put out a pipeline fire or a tunnel fire. There's no way to do that. And even the largest wildland fire department in the country, CAL FIRE, can't do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense and it's pertinent to this conversation. We appreciate your comment.
So I and the other piece of it is most of the fire that we have occurs on the federal jurisdiction. And the city's not going to build a fire department big enough to take care of the federal jurisdiction. So why is that even an issue? Do the best you can with the front end of it in mitigating stuff. And we've done a great job of that around this city. 10,000 acre fuel reduction projects that surround the city of Flagstaff. The big threat is not the tsunami of fire coming out of the forest. I'm sorry, it's just not there.
All right,
Thank
thanks, Dirk.
you.
I think we've got to the point where I don't see much enthusiasm from anyone else to adding or changing anything here.
I just want 30 seconds to clarify a point. I wasn't coming after you for any other reason besides we weren't speaking to the topic. And at this meeting, that's what we kind of have to go for. I also support more fire trucks, electrified maybe, and also adding an additional person to each fire truck. You know that.
All righty, so unless I hear otherwise. Seems comfortable with that. So we're going to review we're going to talk about high priority action items. Julie just
I can tell you about.
left. Yeah, what was yours?
Real easy. So it's on page 916, it's the third one from the bottom, or the 10th block from the top. It's not under priority items, but I'm thinking about maybe moving it up. Reads, based on risks and timing of CIP, identify neighborhoods that remain at high risk for flooding. And this is really worded poorly, and should be implementing floodproofing provisions. I'm assuming an editor will. Doesn't that seem like something that should be a high priority? You seen that one, the third up from the bottom there? Yeah. And that it should be continuous rather than a long-term. Something that I hadn't caught that before when I was reading through it again. It just seems like. You think about it.
Everyone all right with moving it up?
So
It's somewhat already happening.
Already doing it.
It's urgent. Yeah. Yeah.
To me. Flooding. I don't know what Julie was.
Julie's mention was that she thought that we had 21 or so items, and there doesn't seem to be that many in them.
There are 22, but there was an error in the PDF that you guys got where the appendix is missing two of the ones that are in the chapter as high priority. So that was just a small error, but so it's, if you're looking at your own PDF, it's 20, but it's really 22. And in each chapter, those are.
Between, I think the point was between 915 and 916. 16 items.
I think it's critical that we look at neighborhoods at risk of flooding, not just as a fire risk. We can't pin our way out of the fact we live at the base of a mountain. And fire or not, there's going to be more flooding. We have one side of town that has robust flood infrastructure and one side that doesn't.
16 on this page.
Excuse me. Just the other pad.
So I think that what Elsa was saying is there was an error that two of the high priority ones listed in chapters didn't get copied to the appendix. So that's just a copy paste correction on appendix C. Is that right?
This particular item, is it?
So, but for this item, yeah, if you move it up to a high priority item, then there would be 23 of them.
Oh, I see. Okay, I got it. All right.
There's two separate things.
Is that okay to have another one? This one just seems.
Julie, what was your thing on the high priority action items?
No, I thought there was one that we didn't talk about.
There
but-
was, yeah, I was trying to find that one. Something added into the high priority that we hadn't heard of about. Biological, medical.
Yeah, it was,
The science one?
developers to create infrastructure for future developments and expansion of bioscience related facilities.
What is that?
That was added. Yes, that was a piece that was added at the last. It didn't exist as an action item before, and Tom had made some comments, I think, about not to need to be ones that supported technology.
So this is what you drafted in response.
Yes.
We didn't actually review it specifically. So I came across, I was like, I don't remember. that.
Yes, it was based on a discussion where we said we wanted something that looked like this, and this is what we drafted.
And I kind of don't get it.
Sound like-
Wait a
For the top of the sentence sounds like something different.
In the last part of the sentence, yeah, so I didn't, that's why I was like, I don't.
And it
So
should,
how should it be?
it should be development and expansion, not development. So
Well,
that could-
an expansion? Okay.
Yeah, it's supposed to be development and expansion.
No, I didn't.
I don't want to skip this either, but Tom had a good point about the language we used around the revising. And it was interpreted as sort of weakening, and we can maybe have one of the high priority action items as well about revise the city of Flagstaff zoning, building, fire and engineering codes, and you were concerned that was kind of interpreted as weakening. So I don't want to skip that.
Oh, sorry.
Make sure that we use words that don't interpret it as like, we're not going to weaken anything.
Yeah, and revise, I mean, we talked about that internally a little and said, revise does not mean weaken. Just revise those on a regular schedule, and we have to make sure all of those codes work together properly. And so they're always revised a little bit, like, you don't just take all those codes and then throw them in the pot and see what happens. We actually have to make sure that the engineering code and the fire code don't provide different directions.
Right, I'm just wondering if you picked it up that way, then we should add some sort of context in there that just says revise to strengthen, or, I don't know, they're just a way to.
There's just so many goals and policies that go into that revision.
Yeah.
It'd be a paragraph. I mean, that'd be my concern, is that we're revising it per all these goals and policies and the other things we've discussed. It's hard to feel like we've got it all down, but there's we could have so much repetition. I'm a hard fighter on the repetition in the document, because it's very easy to do and say, well, we should also say it here, and we should also say it here, and we should also say it here. But that is meant to be a catch-all for 10 things that are in the goals and policies. And every time we revise those, we look at the regional plan too. Let me see. Yeah, we could if as Elsa's showing on the screen under the high priority section, we have not yet written these discussion sections. We were going to show you guys what the table could look like, but we still need to send those to staff and work and revise these. This is more like the mini work plan portion, where there's a little more information on why these high priority things, how we'll get them done. Yeah.
Reduce barriers to affordable housing and development, comma, reduce wildfire risk, comma, support carbon neutrality.
Yeah.
I think that would maybe take any uncertainty out of there.
Yeah.
So just go backwards. Were we done with the item that you were discussing, Julie?
It doesn't make sense to me.
I don't even like it. I don't like it at all. I don't know why suddenly bioscience is a high priority item. Feels like,
Creating an infrastructure for, I just didn't follow it.
feels like trying to horseshoe some,
Maybe we didn't capture the conversation very well.
There you go.
That one, we got input from economic vitality staff about what would be a likely economic development action that could be implemented, and bioscience was sort of the opportunity that they came up with.
They said it's creating the infrastructure for it. It's not actually.
like to get rid of it.
Create it for the one proofing.
Just get rid of
I think we add one proofing. And we still have 22.
it. Okay, sure. Yeah. Trade it. Is everyone okay with that? What does everyone think? Can we get rid of this? So, we're axing it.
It's
Yes.
two different. Sorry.
So you agree, Paul? Thank you.
No. Hold on. I heard two actions. One, there's a proposal to delete this one, which I think we need to hear. Is there support for deleting this from the, maybe revising it and leaving it as a other action item, but deleting it from the high priority items? So when we say delete, we mean revise it and remove it from the high priority list. Is that?
I guess before you take any action, maybe it'd be good to make sure that it has clarity. I don't think.
Sure, no, I know, but I'm trying to break this multi-part thing we were
Okay.
just talking about into
Okay.
individual things. So is that part is clear? Is that
So removing this from the high priority list would be fine with.
and revising it to deal with the uncertainty that Julie and Michelle?
And I have a comment on, Julie has a comment actually on the one that I was suggesting moving up on flood.
Wait, just stay on one. I think that's leading to too much confusion. Don't do that. That's why it's too late to be be commingling ideas.
Everyone on board with what, Sarah just suggested? This is gonna, this,
I only saw one person with their hand up and I saw a lot of side conversations, so I guess
is everyone, on board? Is anyone
Dirk's hand is up.
opposed to this?
Say it
What are we
again. What's
voting on?
this?
We are
What's on the screen?
not disagreeing that we will push this down to other action items. It will not be high priority and it'll be reworked.
It'll go under other.
Okay?
Dirk's hand was up and so Susie, what were you gonna say?
I'm just gonna say, yes, I agree.
Michelle, what was your thing?
Well, it was actually Julie's comment. We were having a little side conversation about the suggestion of moving up being CIP improvement on up to a priority.
Yeah.
And maybe we should massage the language a bit based on. Julie's.
Yeah, because we can't flood proof. That's unachievable.
So there are flood proofing techniques that we do to housing, like.
Oh, you're talking to the house itself,
Yes, it's about the house itself.
but that would be a capital improvement.
That's CIP.
I think that's where the confusion.
Oh, no, it's relative to when the CIP improvements are gonna occur, so flood proof.
So consider the risk and timing of CIP improvements when looking at where to prioritize flood proofing provisions.
Clearer for you, Julie. Something about houses. or-
Capital improvement plan.
I ask this every meeting.
I know, it's okay.
Would it just be,
It's in the abbreviation index.
would it lose too much if it just said based on risk and timing of CIP improvements, identify neighborhoods that remain at higher risk for flooding, period?
Do what with them?
Well, I guess I don't know what we're implementing. Implementing flood proofing provisions, though, it would be on a house level.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make sense that that sentence in there with the CIP, because I think the intent of this is trying to prioritize CIP improvements, but there's still a high level of risk.
Think about the housing, but the bigger.
Exactly.
That's what I was thinking.
I
about,
was
the bigger
too.
picture.
Yeah, I think we have to take that out.
Yeah, so take out the second part. So, is that yours?
Yeah.
Because that's what I was thinking. Higher level. All right.
Thanks.
I massage the wording on this little, Michelle said it, Michelle McNulty said it better. Yeah. I've got the ability to play this back, so I can remember those words tomorrow morning.
Alrighty, guys, that was, the item J is other topics, may be requested as time allows, and it does not allow, so.
Dirk has his hand up. Dirk, did we miss you?
I have a minute or two. Dirk, do you need to say something else? Oh,
Dirk?
You're on mute.
Oh, no, I think that was about the fire discussion earlier. I'm sorry.
Lower your hand then. Thanks.
Thank you, Brent. Yes.
That's in
Yes.
my sentence here, so I just want to talk about it real quick. There's nothing under, for business-based, home-based businesses, there's not a completed sentence here, and I don't understand what the law is anywhere in the plan. There's no real structure, no wording, nothing.
On what is a home-based business or?
Yeah, what are the rules? Because under 517, it stops. Doesn't even continue. There's no rest of the language. So reduce barrier to city code to create home-based businesses and expanding on as long as said, then it just says nothing. I made a suggestion as long as businesses abide by local, federal, and state laws and pay their share of privileged sales tax where applicable. Because it just stops.
I just think that was maybe the as long as just should have been deleted.
Good.
Code already allows for home-based business and already has that defined. Does it need to?
It just says remove barriers to home-based expansion. This is all part of the neighborhood note stuff that we incorporated into more largely the neighborhood section. I think it's just a failure to delete the sentence. Because I mean, everything in the plan has to abide by all local, state and federal laws. Sorry, can you say where it was on the page, Ann?
bullet up from the bottom.
On 517.
I just want to make sure there wasn't some other thought that's going that I missed on that, because
Could you say the page number again?
517.
you're right, it did.
5-7. Fourth bullet down from the top.
Fourth bullet from the top.
Okay, it is here. Yeah, I see. Need to.
I think it just,
518.
I think there was just a failure to.
Fix that.
Yes, yeah. So please know, anything that I didn't address tonight, I have over 100 of your comments. I am going to go through them all. I just couldn't go through them all in this short of a period of time. And I will get back to you. And if I need clarification, I will follow up with people individually. So unless there was something else that really needed the group discussion, there are a few people who hung on for public comment, I think. So.
Yeah, so that's, sorry, item 6 on the agenda was what you just said, right?
Yep.
We have time for patient Dennis, if you wanted to say something.
I just want to say thanks for caring about the city, and I learned a lot from everyone today. You guys should be proud of yourselves for really being unsung heroes of the city. Keep up the good work.
Best public participation.
I think the last thing to do on the meeting agenda is, can we make a motion to endorse this as a public review with the changes we discussed?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion. Gonna need a second.
Oh, Rick got in there first. Rick seconded it. It's a historic second. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Online, people are aye.
Any abstentions? Alright, the motion carries. And the endorsed.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
I like the.